Welcome back to Apex Sci-Fi. The Zenthari Seekers were a race of sky dwellers. They lived on a world of floating cities and thin violet air. They were fast, they were elegant, and they relied entirely on their high-tech flight suits and long-range scanners. When they set their sights on Mars, they saw a dead rock. They saw a planet with no air, no life, and no hope. They believed that the human miners living in the underground tunnels of Olympus Base were trapped. Easy pickings for a superior aerial force. The humans are tethered to their oxygen tanks. High Seeker Valen sneered as his golden fleet descended into the Martian atmosphere. They move like slugs in their heavy suits. We will descend, we will glass their airlocks, and they will suffocate in their own bunkers. This is not a war, it is a cleaning. Valen was wrong. He didn't understand that Mars isn't a dead rock. It is a world that has been trying to kill humans for 3 generations. And we've learned to love it for that. The Zenthari landed their sleek, bird-like dropships on the Tharsis plain. They stepped out in their light, pressurized silk suits, protected by shimmering energy fields. They carried elegant needle rifles that fired beams of concentrated heat. They began their march toward the human base, moving with a grace that mocked the gravity of the red planet. Then the red ghost arrived. It wasn't a soldier. It was a storm. A massive, planet-wide dust storm, the kind that turns the Martian sky into a wall of solid red sand and static electricity. The wind spiked to 200 miles per hour. The sand wasn't just dust, it was microfine silica that acted like sandpaper, grinding away at anything it touched. Scanners are blind, a Zenthari scout shrieked over the comms. The sand is jamming the thermal frequencies. I can't see the horizon. Stay in formation. Valen commanded. Use your flight thrusters to stay above the dust. But the Zenthari thrusters, designed for clean air, sucked in the Martian grit. The delicate turbines began to shriek and stall. The gods of the sky were forced down into the dirt, blinded and grounded. That's when Captain Sarah Spectre Miller and her team moved in. The humans didn't use thermal scanners. They didn't use flight suits. They used vibration tracking. They had lived on Mars long enough to know that you don't fight with your eyes, you fight with your feet. They could feel the heavy, clumsy steps of the Zenthari through the ground. Sarah emerged from the red haze like a phantom. She wasn't wearing a sleek suit, she was in a reinforced, lead-lined EVA suit covered in jagged scrap metal for extra protection. She didn't have a rifle. She had a Sunderblade, a heavy machete that vibrated at a frequency high enough to shatter glass and energy shields alike. A Zenthari warrior turned, his needle rifle glowing. He fired wildly into the red dark. Sarah didn't flinch. She slid through the sand, staying low. She was under his guard before he could reload. She drove the Sunderblade into the alien's chest plate. The vibration shattered the Zenthari's life support unit in a spray of white mist. The alien collapsed, gasping for air that didn't exist. They're in the dust, the Zenthari screamed. The ghosts are in the dust. The battle turned into a slaughter of elegance by grit. The Zenthari were fighting a war of technology, the humans were fighting a war of survival. Miller and her squad used the storm as a weapon. They popped smoke grenades that blended perfectly with the red sand, making them completely invisible. They moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the howling wind. Sarah found High Seeker Valen near his downed dropship. He was trying to restart his shields, his hands shaking. He looked up and saw her, a monster of red dust and glowing red visors. You should be dead. Valen yelled, firing his needle pistol. The beam grazed Sarah's shoulder, melting the outer layer of her suit, but she didn't stop. The pressure. The cold. How do you move in this? Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. She lunged, grabbing Valen's slender neck with a hand strengthened by years of working in Martian gravity. She slammed him into the side of his own ship. You thought Mars was empty, Sarah's voice came through her external speaker, sounding like grinding metal. But it's not. It's full of us. And we don't need the sun to kill you. She punched through the dropship's cockpit glass, letting the Martian vacuum do the rest of the work. By the time the storm subsided 3 days later, the Zenthari fleet was a graveyard of broken glass and buried gold. Of the 5,000 invaders who landed, only a handful of survivors reached their escape pods. They told stories of the red ghosts, demons who could breathe the sand and move through the storm like it was their mother's womb. The Zenthari seekers abandoned the Sol system. They removed Mars from their star charts, labeling it a forbidden death world. The Galactic Council asked Captain Miller how she felt about the invasion. They wanted to know about the strategy, the tactics, and the technology. Sarah, sitting in a pressurized bar in Olympus Base, drinking a glass of synthetic Martian whiskey, just looked at them. Strategy? She laughed. There was no strategy. They came to our house and tried to tell us the weather was too bad for a fight. We just showed them that on Mars the weather is the fight. You want our planet? You have to be harder than the rock. And nobody is harder than a Martian. Humanity had proven the ultimate environmental HFY truth. You can't invade a world that the locals have already conquered. We don't just live on Mars. We are Mars. And if you try to take it, the red sand will be the last thing you ever see. This has been Apex Sci-Fi. The storm is our home. The dust is our cloak. If you enjoyed this action-packed defense of the red planet, hit that like button. Comment below. Which planet would be the hardest for an alien to invade? Subscribe for the next front, the Scrapyard Fortress. The wind is howling. The ghosts are waiting.